equity, oftentimes we hear equity and, people can feel uncomfortable with it because they think, oh boy, this is about compensation, right? It's about making sure that there's gender equity, meaning reducing a gender pay gap within the company, and then looking at equity, making sure that there's equity in terms of pay across race and ethnicity. Certainly that's a component of it. It's a very important component of it, but that's not the only component of equity. So I look at equity and I think three things. Equity is about distribution, and more specifically, fairness in distribution and access. So distribution, fairness, and access. Those are the three ways that I think of and define equity, right? So equity is not equality. Equality is about being even. Everyone gets the exact same thing. So when I had someone, when we were having this discussion, they said, Martine, I have a perfect example. I've got 3 kids. I don't treat all 3 kids equally. I'm equitable, but each child has a different need. One child might be more outgoing and needs more one-on-one time with me. Maybe another child is a little bit more shy. And so what this person basically illustrated to me is that people show up in life with a different makeup. And so they have different needs. They have different, I wouldn't call them inadequacies, but different needs and different goals and objectives and wants. And what's the most fair way of doing things is figuring out what their needs are and providing them with what their needs are, as opposed to being equal across the board. So it's really meeting people where they are based on their needs. And that's what allows for more equity. Equality assumes we can only have equality once we have equity. But we've got a long way to go. We have a long way to go because historically, in America, more specifically, there have been practices that have kept certain groups of people based on race, based on gender. They've kept them from having the same access to things like education, jobs, certain access to certain neighborhoods and opportunities. So therefore, that group of individuals historically is lagged behind, and they have had to make extra effort. They try to catch up, but they can't ever catch up, right? Because they've always their starting line has always been maybe steps behind the actual starting line. So the dominant group has had more opportunities and has benefited more than the non-dominant groups or group. And so we cannot establish equality because it's not equal footing yet. If this person has always lagged behind because opportunities were not provided or allocated because of systemic practices like slavery, then how can we, or women's suffrage, then how can we really say that we're equal? We're not there yet. So we've got to come up with equitable practices. So that's an example of, or that's a great way to distinguish equity versus equality. And think about, for school teachers, right? So if we're not parents, imagine we were teaching a group of 5th graders. Not every 5th grader has the same background. Not every 5th grader has the same experience in their household. And so even though they all show up to the same class and you're teaching the same curriculum, one 5th grader might have different needs than another 5th grader. One 5th grader might have dyslexia. Another 5th grader might live in a home where he or she or they have access to tutors to support them. Another 5th grader might live in a situation or home where their parents aren't around as much because they're working late. So this 5th grader is left to themselves to teach themselves and figure out their homework assignment. So as a teacher, it wouldn't be fair to expect all of these fifth graders you would expect the same outcome, but you want to make sure that each fifth grader has the adequate support and resources to be able to reach the same outcome. So that's really when the distinction between equity and equality. So going back to equity, now that we understand how it's different from equality, and what I do want to emphasize is that when it comes to equity, it doesn't mean that the expectations are different for different people. No, we want to always bring in, especially in the context of the workplace, we always bring in qualified candidates who can do the job and have the skill set. But what we consider, especially as a manager, we consider that each person comes from a different environment, right? And has different experiences. So they're going to have a different way of reaching the goal that you have set for them, right? And they might need different support or guidance in reaching the goal that you have set for him, her, or them as a manager. And so we want to keep that in mind. So that's one way that we can, define equity, is really thinking about how it's different from equality. Equity is really about access to opportunities. So think about all the opportunities that are offered in an organization. Opportunities to be part of mentorship programs, opportunities and access to the senior leadership. Think about the actual proximity to certain people within the organization. Think about where your headquarters are located and who has more access to those people, usually senior leadership, who are in the headquarters. It's the people, the employees, who are located in the headquarters. So people who are, if you're in retail, so people who are in stores or people who are located in small other regions may not have the same access. How do we compensate for that, right? The distance, and make sure that everyone feels like they have the same access to certain people, certain programs and initiatives. And the reason we think about access is because access leads to opportunities, right? So if everyone in the organization doesn't have the same access, don't have a fairness and equitable distribution of access, then they don't have the same opportunities to get to where they want to get to. Are we being equitable as an organization? As a hiring manager, am I being equitable or thinking about and creating equitable practices? The best way to start to answer that question is to look around and ask yourself, is there a lack of diversity, or could there be more diversity on my team? And again, we can look at diversity on 3 different levels, right? So it's not just the first level, which is the physical attributes and biological. That's one, but we can also look at level 3, right? Thought, beliefs, style of communication, and we can link it to all the other 2 later.